I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is expectations. And what we're talking about is how expectations can be a joy killer. And I think a lot of us live in expectation and evaluate the quality of our lives based on expectations that are met or unmet. And there may be other ways to look at it. So that's what we'll be exploring today. But before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now we're going to press our palms together, vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, expectations. This conversation comes about due to a conversation that I had with a client yesterday who has been engaged in a practice for a year now to help them be more present, to help them create new neural pathways, really powerful work. And of course, it complements the work that we do together in the core connection work really, really beautifully. Anyway, this person was saying, I just don't know if it worked. And I said, well, how would you know if it had worked? And this person said, well, I would be feeling calm in every situation and experience a little bit of joy. So I would feel calm in every situation and experience a little bit of joy. And I said, is that a fair expectation? Does anybody actually feel calm in every situation? And I think that was a really, really important question. Does anybody actually feel calm in every situation? And a little bit of joy. And then we got into deeper conversation about what this whole expectation was. And I was able to point out to this person these very dramatic transformations that they had undergone over this period of a year. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to have you joining us this morning. We're talking about expectations and how expectations can be a joy killer, really is what we're talking about. So I have so many examples of it, but we're just talking about this one instance at the moment. So I was able to point out to this person all kinds of really dramatic shifts that had occurred. And one of the things that I have my clients do is keep what we either call a breakthrough journal or an evidence journal, which is tracking transformations that occur for them throughout their process. And this is, for this particular person, it was really hard to get them to do that in the because they didn't like the idea of it being a breakthrough journal, because that felt self-aggrandizing. So that's where we came up with, well, it's an evidence journal. It's an evidence of change happening, so that you have the ability to go and recognize when you're not sure, that something is happening, something is changing, that there's progress, that you then have the opportunity to go back and say, oh, here's proof, here's proof, here's proof. So there were so many instances of radical transformation, and this person was discounting all of that transformation because they had an expectation, which we had discussed previously, to say, that might not be the most realistic expectation, but they were discounting all of their progress because their expectation wasn't met. And as a result of that, it's when we're saying, well, my expectation wasn't met, what happens is that we may be in denial of reality, right? Or we are in denial. We're saying, I'm prioritizing my expectation over reality. Like, my expectation is more real and holds more weight than the reality, and therefore reality is wrong because it should be different. So another place where I see this happening a lot for folks who are spiritually oriented and on this path of awakening, and trying to do something in the world, and end up torturing themselves because they're not where they think they should be at a certain phase of life, right? That there's this expectation that life should be a certain way, business should be a certain way, their development should be in a certain place. And then when reality doesn't match that expectation, there's all this disappointment and feelings of frustration and impatience and maybe failure, all kinds of stories that we create when we compare reality to the expectations that we had, and we give primacy to the expectation and say, well, that's the reality, and reality isn't matching that. And I think when we think about it, when we look at that dynamic, we can see how crazy that is, right? I created a fabricated story of how I think things should be, or how I want things to be. And then when reality doesn't match that story, I'm thrown into suffering or upset or frustration or anger or any number of emotional dynamics. It's kind of nuts. It's kind of nuts. Because what happens when we do that is say, here's what I expected it to look like. Here's what I wanted it to look like. And it doesn't look that way. Failure and regret, Rosalind says. Yes, this is how we create failure and regret. It's all manufactured by that story that we created of This is how it should be. At this point in my life, I should have this. I should be in this place. I should whatever. When we're talking about shoulds. And who says you should? This is an important question because we might say, well, I say, but it may not be quite that simple. It may be that our shoulds are tied in with certain cultural values that aren't even our own, that we haven't even consciously chosen, but that we just assimilated somehow. And maybe, what if life is exactly as it should be? What if things are unfolding exactly as they should? Maybe there's no should at all. Maybe it what is what's unfolding is. And when we use this notion of shoulda, woulda, coulda, we're imposing an idea onto a reality, and then oftentimes discovering that reality doesn't measure up to that fantasy that we created. It doesn't exist as the fantasy, and we're more attached to the fantasy than we are to being present, in life as it's unfolding, right? So many times, at least in my life, and I would imagine if you take a look in your life as well, things do not unfold according to your expectations. And thank heaven that they don't, right? Even if there are disappointments along the way, oftentimes there are forks in the road that take you in unexpected directions that, had things unfolded according to your expectations, never would have occurred. And this notion of how things should be is a source not only of failure and regret, but of intense suffering and frustration and sadness. I mean, how crazy is it to create this expectation of ourselves, even this expectation of ourselves that we don't meet, and then we determine that there's something wrong with us because we had this whole fantasy of how we should show up or how we should be. So the caution here is to notice when you're shoulding yourself or others or life itself. It should be easy. Well, how do we create ease? Is that something that is external? When we're kicking and screaming and fighting life, how could it be easy? Life becomes a whole lot more easy when we allow ourselves to flow with it, when we allow ourselves to be responsive to it rather than reactive. Rosalind says there's more freedom when you don't have to stay within the lines. Free form. Beautiful, Rosalind. Absolutely. And who makes the lines? Typically we do, right? Or we accept the lines that are being made for us. And then we say, well, I didn't color inside the lines, so I'm bad and wrong. When it's all made up anyway. So I am thinking of another person who at an earlier age was, I don't know if we could say gifted or cursed or whatever, with being told that their role was as a teacher, that their role was to be a teacher and a leader and working in spirituality, etc. And that manifestation of themselves had not shown up yet. Like the opportunities around that, the expression of that they have as an expectation hasn't yet manifest. And the frustration, upset, anger, sadness, suffering, like I should be there already. This is taking way too long. But the thing is that the person hadn't learned the things they need to learn in order to be the teacher they expect themselves to be yet. And things come in not necessarily the time frame that we would wish for or hope for or expect. Things often take way longer than we anticipate and often follow much more convoluted paths. And when we can, I think the key pretty much to everything is when we can release the resistance and allow ourselves to be fully present instead of resisting the way things are right here, right now. If we can release the resistance, then we can recognize that what is actually present. And when we can recognize what is actually present, then we can be responsive to it in a very different way. When we're fighting it and railing against it and judging it, we're not able to be present. We're not able to respond to the present moment or take most appropriate action because we're so busy trying to deny or push away what the reality is. And we live at the same dynamic has us living in our heads, living in a fantasy world. And it might all be a fantasy world. It might all be projection. Who knows? I tend to think that that's quite true in so many layers and ways. But the resistance, the fighting against what's so, is actually incapacitating to us. And it's not to say releasing the resistance is not being complacent. That's not what I'm talking about. I don't mean rolling over and accepting. I mean being present so that appropriate action can make itself, it can be called forth. Where we can recognize different avenues of opportunity and avenues for action that are not accessible to us when we're caught in this resistance and expectation of how things should be. And oftentimes, particularly when we have negative expectations, we manage to make those manifest almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy because we set ourselves up for failure. I think that there's a difference as I'm thinking about manifesting. One of the things that we talk about with manifesting is experience yourself already experiencing the thing you're desiring, right? That's a very, very different thing than expectation. When we can put ourselves in the experience of abundance, when we can put ourselves in the experience of confidence or of expression of joy, when we can feel the experience of it, that experience is its own reward. It's not an expectation. But when we create an expectation, I keep hearing in my head, expect miracles. And I do actually have that sort of as an undercurrent in my life, expecting miracles. The thing about that is that it's creating an openness. It's not saying, I'm expecting miracles and they're not here yet and they're late and where are my miracles? Because in my framework, when I'm thinking of expect miracles, it's creating a lens to perceive the miracles that are all around us all the time. Like the miracles of nature, for instance, the miracles of synchronicity. It's kind of like getting tuned in, like when you um, purchase an item, like particularly if you purchase a car, this is something I've noticed. It's a big expense. It's a big deal to purchase a car, right? And then all of a sudden you see that same car everywhere uh, because you're tuned into it. So that's a different context of expectation. It's not saying, well, I'm expecting this and it's not happening. So just think about, we make agreements to get together at a certain time and I don't show up or you don't show up. And the other person is like, hey, I expected you to be on time. What the heck? What happened? And maybe that expectation can cause friction, right? Because I had this expectation and it wasn't met. And now I get to be indignant and disappointed and upset, right? But if we can learn to hold things more loosely, we'll be able to experience greater joy, greater fulfillment, greater presence, because life resides in the present. It's this moment. It's the unfolding of this moment and this moment and this moment that holds all the possibility and all the potential, rather than using our expectations as a measure of value. And I guess what I'm hearing now is, well, this far exceeded my expectations. That's kind of a nice thing when that happens, right? Is we realize we had expectations and they were exceeded. That's kind of fun. But expect to your peril, I guess, because just as readily we can have those expectations dashed. And then what? Unless we can be fluid with it. If we can hold our expectations with open hand, then it's like, okay, well, it didn't quite meet the expectations I had, and whatever. I just think that the expectations become a barrier to our experience because we're going in with a certain predisposition. And like this person who has dedicated themselves for a year to a practice that has been absolutely transformative because they had a certain expectation of it, it it lost its value to them, at least temporarily. And so maybe we can be working more with intentions rather than expectations. And with intentions, it's kind of holding things with a bit more of an open hand, I think, because we give ourselves more space to course correct. So that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to please like, follow, and share Enlightened World Network and me. The links are in the description. And as always, it's a pleasure and a privilege to have the opportunity to share these morning musings on what it is to be human. And I deeply, deeply appreciate you and this sharing. So until next time.